In this video I will tell you 10 composition tricks that will transform your images immediately, and if you stick to the end, I will even show you my 2 favorite ones. Before we dive right into it, in case you have been binge watching the other videos, these were the absolute fundamentals of photography. Mastering these is way more important than you may think, because they give you the freedom to get creative, as we will do in the remaining lessons. Therefore, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to repeat them at least 3 times and always in the correct order. Beside that, use the Wolf Method tools that I provide to learn on the fly when you're in the bathroom or walk past your fridge. Okay, so much for talking to your conscience. Now to the fun part, composition. There are certain composition rules, many of which are much older than photography and date back to the old Greek masters of art. They are valid no matter if you photograph, paint or furnish your kitchen or living room. These guidelines help you make things appealing to your own and other people's eyes. Some people have a natural talent for that, others can learn it like a craft. If you feel you don't have all that much creative talent, I recommend sticking to those guidelines. It is of course always okay to break them, but if you feel like you lack creative talent, it will be rather difficult for you to break the rules and still get good looking images. An important tip when it comes to finding out whether you're talented or not, don't ask your friends or family whether they like your images. They will hardly ever tell you the truth. Seek out real feedback and maybe even ask for harsh feedback from Facebook groups, forums and other sources. That can sometimes hurt, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the people who critique your shots are correct. In the photography world, there are too many self-proclaimed experts who have no idea how bad their own images are, but enjoy putting others down. However, seeking even those people's feedback helps you to stay grounded and question your choices for composition, because only when you do that will you keep experimenting and improving. Now to the composition guidelines. I'll start with the most obvious one, then we go to the more sophisticated ones, and at the end I will tell you my 2 favorite compositional guidelines. Composition rule number 1. Fill the frame. This is what you would see many beginners doing. Concentrating on so many other things like exposure, focus, etc., they don't have much brain power left for composition and place their main subject, which is the faces of the people they photograph, dead center. That is again why it is so important that the camera settings, focus and everything else becomes second nature. If it does, it will free your mind and you can concentrate on not making these mistakes. Obviously, cutting off feet while leaving lots of headroom looks a little weird and a lot of space is wasted, particularly at the top. You can easily get closer or zoom in to fill the frame. A little space on top is okay, but not too much. Composition rule number 2. Keep your horizon level. That might sound obvious, but this is probably the most unintentionally broken compositional rule. Particularly when you're on a lake, the ocean, or if there are lines in the frame that are obviously supposed to be vertical. Use these lines to make sure your image is level. Many cameras have little helpers built in. The only issue with most of them, they will only show you that the horizon is off when you are past 1 degree. And 1 degree is a lot when you're shooting the sunset at the sea, so make sure you are aware of that. Composition rule number 3. Pay attention to your background. The background is part of your image just like your main subject is. Anything that is drawing attention away from your main subject without helping you tell the story of your image is to be avoided. Whenever you can, remove anything that is distracting or grows out of your subject's head or limbs. You can either physically remove these things, or you can change your position to shoot in a direction where the background is less cluttered. One thing regarding backgrounds. Photography is a lot about opportunities. If you can photograph at a big international sports event, it is much easier to get good images than when you're shooting a local meeting. Simply because the background itself is much more interesting. So when shooting things like that, don't get frustrated because your images don't look as good as the ones you see in magazines. Try to choose your point of view in a way that the background merely gets irrelevant and your subject stands out as good as possible. Composition rule number 4. The rule of space. Almost every subject has a direction. Whether it's the direction it is looking towards, facing towards or moving to, it has a direction. Always leave more space in the direction your subject is moving to than in the opposite direction. It just looks weird when a car on the road is facing the edge of the frame and has nowhere to go, unless there is a valid reason to frame it like that. For example, if your image is supposed to tell the story of a very old car that has most of its life behind it. Also, picturing a car's emissions or placing text behind the car could be a reason to break the rule of space. Composition rule number 5, the rule of thirds or the golden ratio. We've been talking about not placing your subject's head dead center vertically, but the same is true for the horizontal position. Placing your subject off center will make your composition much more pleasing to the eye. There are 2 guidelines on where to place your subject. The easier one is the rule of thirds. You can display grids of thirds in the viewfinder of most cameras, and if you place your subject on one of those grids, you will automatically get a better composition. The more sophisticated rule is the golden ratio. It has its origin in ancient Greece and it can be found in architecture, art and even in nature like the Nautilus shell. It is considered to be a natural balance of ratios, but since there are usually no lines for that in a camera, which still surprises me after all those years, you have to merely eyeball it. If you place your subject at the ratio of 1 to one side and 1.618 to the other side, you will probably find out that all of a sudden your composition looks even more pleasing than with the rule of thirds. It's almost like magic, so please try it. But don't start measuring your frame. You can eyeball it easily once you get a bit used to it. A disclaimer again. While this particular rule works very well, it is still a guideline. There definitely are situations when you want to break that rule. For example, when you want to photograph a Christmas card and you need to leave room for text. Also for magazine titles, etc. You often need to keep in mind where you want to place the text. But as I said, learn the ratios and use the ratios before you break them. Composition rule number 6, symmetry. If something is symmetric, take utmost care to shoot it symmetrically. That means the lens of your camera has to be right in the extension of the exact center of, let's say, a symmetric building. And with exact center, I mean exact center. Even a few inches can totally screw your image. Then find the center of the building in your viewfinder or monitor and place it right in the middle of your frame. Only then will you be able to get a really great image. Everything else will look skewed. If you don't have enough time to find the exact position, it's better to step quite a ways to the side and shoot in an angle than symmetrically. Composition rule number 7, perspective. All too often we shoot from the same perspective, standing upright and just holding our camera at eye level. That's probably the most boring perspective you can shoot in, because that is the perspective everyone is used to. Getting down on your knees already gives you a slightly different perspective, but where it gets really interesting is when you get down on the ground. In the past that was cumbersome because it required you to lay on the floor. These days, with tiltable displays, that has become a breeze. The same is true for holding the camera higher up. I admit it is not always easy to see anything on a display in bright daylight, but you should at least give it a try to have more variety and more interesting compositions. Perspective is particularly important when photographing kids or dogs. Getting down to their height gives you a much better image than shooting from the top down. Same is true for sports. Getting low when, for example, shooting high jump will make the jump look much higher. Composition rule number 8, triangle. This is a rule I never pay all that much attention to. If you look at most examples on the web when you search for triangle composition rule photography, they really look made up. As if people after the shot try to add a triangle into an image to kind of explain the rule.
Look, a triangle.
That could of course be me not being artist enough to see that.
Oh, another one.
But to me the triangle rule doesn't do much in regard to composition in photography. What I do care about though is that I try to make important subjects of an image to start in the corners of a frame. So for example, if I photograph a road or a mountain valley, I try to get the edge of these into one of the corners. Composition rule number 9, leading lines. This composition rule is extremely powerful when it comes to drawing the viewer into the image. Anything that will help you achieve that could be called a leading line. That could be a road, a path, a small stream, stairs, etc. But leading lines can also be lines that your main subject moves along. This is one of the most powerful, but also one of the easiest composition rules in photography. Give it a try, it's not difficult to find a road to practice on. Just make sure to stay safe. Before I tell you rule number 10, I owe you my favorite composition guidelines. Number 1 is the golden ratio and number 2 is perspective. I really love to shoot from the ground up. Just using these 2 guidelines for your shots will immediately change the look dramatically. Okay, on we go. Composition rule number 10, light and shadow. This one is super powerful. Light changes dramatically depending on the location, the time of day and direction you're shooting in. But since this is such an important topic in photography, I'll dedicate a complete video to lighting. Before we get there, let me introduce you to the CCT, the coffee composition trick that will improve every single one of your images big time. Unfortunately, it is only available to people who have enrolled to the Wolf Method at wolfarmory.com. See you in the next lesson, my favorite lesson of all, which is all about light and lighting.